Right. Welcome back to Inclusive Design 24 2023, brought to you in partnership with our Platinum supporters, Google and Intopia, and our Gold supporters, Barrier Break and Tetralogical. You can follow us on Mastodon, and if you have any questions for the presenter, please post them using the ID24 hashtag. Alternatively, you can post them directly in the YouTube chat, and we'll collate everything for the Q&A session at the end of the talk. On that note, a reminder that ID24 is a respectful community, and you can find our code of conduct on the Inclusive Design 24 website, so don't misbehave. I am delighted once again this year to be joined by my guest host, Mark Thiele. Mark, over to you.
Yeah, hello, I'm delighted. I mean, it's wonderful to be back. Yeah, and it's a great opportunity to be in talks for 24 hours. It's 12 o'clock where I am, so have a lovely day, everybody. And I am honored to introduce you to the next speaker, which is Donna Bangert, and she's gonna tell us all about the truth we cling to. Donna, over to you.
Hi, all. Thank you both for that lovely introduction and all the support on the back end for all the people who made this happen. Good morning, good day, wherever you are. It's so great to be here and chatting with you all today. So let's go through this. It's the truths we cling to. We're going to talk about the disability experience and intersectionality. So quick overview, some by the numbers. And we want to hear other voices. And we're going to talk about operationalizing inclusion, because if you all are here with me today, you probably don't want me to just tell you about it without actually being able to do anything about it, right? So let's get into it. I had to start off with the Star Wars quote. I'm a complete nerd. I love all of the things, so had to start here. But it's true. I remember seeing Return of the Jedi in the theaters. And I remember this line even sticking with me ever since I was a kid. You're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly upon our own point of view. And of course, at the time, I, applied that to, childish things. I was a kid. But as I got older, I realized the deep wisdom in that simple quote and how it related to our work today. So I can't really start off as discussion about intersectionality without talking about my own social identities. So I grew up a part of the disabled community. I was mysteriously neurodivergent, a generic learning disabled because they weren't really sure where to put me. White, cisgendered, heterosexual, female, American. I grew up pretty poor and I grew up pretty rural, which all impacted the way I viewed the world. And oops, I was bound to have that happen at least once. And because of this, because of my experiences of being the only one in my household who is considered without a disability, but also neurodivergent. So am I? I thought I knew that experience. I thought I knew what the barriers were and the biases. But as I grew into a professional, I realized that, wow, I'm not doing great. I realized that there's so many more voices out there and so many other perspectives and so many other combinations of social identities that build upon each other and create these beautiful, unique experiences in humans. And because of that, and because I am a absolute diehard believer in the disability justice movement, in America in the 1970s, the cry of the disability community was nothing about us without us, meaning you can't make laws without listening to the voices of the disability community. So with that, you're going to see me later on share voices that are not my own, that are not necessarily even an American perspective, that are not the white, female, cisgender, hetero, but what all the stuff I said I was. Because I can't speak for the entire experience any more than any one of the speakers I'll be sharing their content with later can speak for the entire experience. but it is important to be mindful of those voices and to, frankly, raise them up when we have the stage. So by the numbers, let's start off with some information. In the United States, according to the CDC, that 27% of the US population is disabled. According to the World Health Organization, it's 16% globally. That's a lot of humans. So let's take a look at, Global West, right? 26% of the population, approximately, lives in poverty if they are also disabled. 27% of people with disabilities in the UK live in poverty. Nearly 50% of the population in Mexico live in poverty. These are WHO statistics, Canada released, statistics, the UK. I'm not making these numbers up. These are government and World Organization statistics letting us know that different parts of the world, if you are disabled, you are likely to be, or at least a quarter of us are likely to be living in poverty. But this is just a small part of the world. So if 26 of the population, the US population though, let's just make it even smaller, US population who is disabled live in poverty. What is that? What do their intersecting social identities impact them? According to both Center for Disease Control and other Bureau of Labor Statistics and a few other government resources here in the US, nearly 40% of people who identify as both disabled and Black live in poverty. According to these resources, 36% of people who identify as Latin and disabled don't have a high school education. 27% of the LGBTQIA plus community, their employees with disabilities, they feel they are experiencing discrimination in the workplace. And older adults with disabilities have increased food insecurity rates. That's more than 26% compared to 7.2. When we identify the different social identities, we start seeing the different systemic barriers in place. Cultural, economic, logistical, they're all interconnected, these barriers. But I'm talking a lot about the West, right? I said the global West, I made it smaller to the US. What about the rest of the world? There's a huge, huge world out there. Well, in developing countries, 80 to 90% of people with disabilities who are of working age are unemployed, compared to 50 to 70%. Can you imagine 90% of the population of people with disabilities being unemployed? So now that I've given us some really heavy, big numbers, what does this translate to the human experience? So let's listen to a few other speakers here and get those perspectives.
I often think about all the things needed to hold my story, and I'm just going to name a few because I'm not going to make a huge laundry list here, but things like someone who understands disability and ableism, able supremacy, the medical industrial complex, someone who understands the ownership of children and the commodification of children and adoption, someone who understands ugliness and beauty and race and white supremacy, someone who understands the Caribbean, colonization, the US South, anti-Black racism, slavery, someone who understands patriarchy and misogyny, who understands rural lands, who understands queerness, queer people of color, all of these things and so much more, who understand how all of these things intersect. Who is that person? Who are those people? How do we build more and more of these kind of folks and more of these kind of spaces to be able to hold all of our stories? Because I wonder what the things needed to hold your stories are.
Apologies, by the way, for the captions coming on late. I wanted to start with that talk because I loved the way she said that all the things that hold our stories.
I was exceptionally good at not letting people know how dysfunctional I was. I had to work twice or even triply hard just to do normal things.
The issues that bothered my husband and I and caused tension in our marriage were things like time blindness. I was always late for things. As a result, I would make him late too.
People had the idea that ADHD only presented in hyperactive, screaming boys who failed primary school. I wasn't disruptive in class. I went to an IP school. Hi, I'm Dr. Janani. I am 30 years old. I was diagnosed with ADHD in 2019 when I was 28 years old.
Hi, I'm Moon Lake Lee. I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 50.
My name is Cheyenne Xia. I'm 39 years old. I was diagnosed around 29, 30, so it's around the 10-year mark this year.
One of the interesting things about that video and those women's voices was the late diagnosis. You see, when we have these cultural ideas of what something is, what happens is that people aren't identified. So, for example, a lot of women who are neurodivergent, if they're labeled learning disabled at all, they don't always get identified as what. For example, myself in the 90s, early 90s. But we have pictures, right, of that screaming white boy is ADHD who's running around. I've read studies that suggest that in the United States, at least, young children, again, you could have boys who are either Black or Latin descent, are more likely to be diagnosed with what is it? Oh, it's not disagreement. I'm sure somebody in the YouTube chat is going to come in with some wonderful thoughts. Some other defiance, oppositional defiance disorder instead of ADHD. The idea is that they're defiant and not having a barrier regulating their attention. So the idea that these barriers are coming in right at the diagnosis stage, these biases are impacting the way people are treated, and then how that treatment is approached, whether it be in our education systems, in our workplaces, and whatnot. So it's really important to understand that just because somebody may not identify as disabled, maybe they don't even know they're neurodivergent, or if they were told there's something that was more fitting to what people made assumptions that they should be. Maybe people are being identified by the problem they're presenting to others and not the barriers they're facing themselves. So it's important to keep all of this in mind as we think about these intersections.
Diversity and inclusion are touted as the main pillars of Pride, but people with disabilities are still often left out when it comes to the discussion and celebration of sexual and gender diversity. It was only in 2018 that the iconic Stonewall Inn bar denied entrance to a blind queer person because they didn't provide paperwork for their service dog, which is a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which states that no paperwork is needed for the entrance of a service animal. And that event is purely notable because the person involved actually tried to get in. See, most disabled people don't say anything about inaccessible venues because we're just so bloody used to it. I mean, and we're just going to put a pin in impossible to enter venues. We do also have to deal with the desexualization of disabled people in general. The widely held belief that we can't have alternative sexualities because we can't be sexual in the first place. Which, by the way, is a really fun to experience, juxtaposed with the hypersexualization of my lesbianism. No one has ever yelled at my wife and I to kiss from a crowd when I'm in my wheelchair, but once I'm out of it, beware. The funny thing is that there are many parallels between the experiences of people with disabilities or chronic illnesses and lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people. Both groups face discrimination and prejudice and are represented as other in society. Yet, part of this othering is about suppressing variation within the communities and viewing us as homogenous. I mean, I made a joke in my last video, but I think we're all pretty much aware of the poster look for Pride. He's white, he's cis, he's male, he spends way too much time at the gym, and his clothes just kind of fall off him in ways that would be completely unacceptable at any other time. Where are the gender non-conforming party goers? Where are the people from ethnic minorities? Where are visibly religious queer people? And could we just talk about how it's always the pretty gays or the people who pass? Equally, disabled people do not all look like this, the good old blue plaque that tells me wear a very skinny version and be as welcome. But I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user, so that means I only use my wheelchair some of the time. For both groups, there's a level of exclusion and isolation that we face from the mainstream. The need for a safe, supportive space is therefore paramount for each community, a place of acceptance and understanding. Pride. So,
I love this video because she's calling out the fact that the intersections are sometimes being excluded within the other groups. And I use the word othering or other there
diversity and inclusion are touted as the main
because of the othering in society. When you are someone with a disability, you are other. When you are identified as, she said, if her homosexuality, she feels, puts her as an othering in society. Other people's other social identities are othering. There were certain things I didn't participate in just because I grew up pretty poor. So there was an othering there because I wasn't there. There's always that sense of other, regardless of which social identity you're discussing, because we're all made up of that multitude as discussed in that first video. And finally, these amazing women, triple cripples.
Now, back to the point. Being a disabled person can be a very isolating experience.
Yeah.
Being a disabled Black person can be even more isolating.
Yeah. Cultural and religious taboos surrounding disability can mean that often there is a lot of shame, restriction, and fear. And lack of representation means that often the only Black disabled person you know is you.
Or in the case of triple cripples, I got another one.
Yeah.
I got a spare.
But we had to have triple cripples to find each other. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
It's
all right.
coming to just destroy the whole thing. The whole point is we need to exist now.
We need to exist. All right. So, for empowerment. Now, for each of us personally, the world has opened up. And Triple Cripples has connected us to a global network and a global community of women, femmes, and non-binary people of all ethnicities.
Yeah. You see, if you are making sure that the most vulnerable people are looked after and cared for, seen and loved, everyone else benefits.
Exactly. Many of our supporters are actually non-people of color, and that in itself is telling. We are needed.
Yeah. We are necessary, and by existing, we are telling people that they deserve to be heard, that they.
A common theme in all of these videos is the isolation. When we feel othered, we are isolated. And there's that lack of sense of belonging. There's that lack of being heard, appreciated. And that quote is right. I've heard variations of it in many places, but she's absolutely right. When we take care of our most vulnerable, everyone benefits. Not only because we're taking care and we put in the safeguards, but because those voices are important. These voices need to be heard. Your voice needs to be heard, regardless of what the combination of your social identities may be. Your voice is important. You have something to say. Because everyone needs to be seen, heard, or have that sense of belonging, and have that sense of belonging. Our power comes from knowing that this is where we are supposed to stand. We are not other. We're just an individual amongst a larger group. I love this quote. Diversity is multi-layered. We need all of our different experiences represented. Every single one of us has something to bring to an organization. So we've heard a lot of me talking here. We've heard me talk about the numbers, the overwhelming statistics. We've talked a little bit about what makes up our stories. What are those identities that make up our stories? We've talked about how growing up, I thought I got it. I thought I understood disability until I started hearing voices and reading voices and wanting to raise up voices of other people whose experiences are very different from mine, but just as valuable. And we heard how everybody's voice, including your own, regardless if you identify as disabled or not, if you identified as neurodivergent but not disabled, if whatever your identities are, whatever beautiful mix of ingredients make up whatever makes you you, that's important. And now let's talk about oh wow, it's early here. Operationalizing inclusion. Let's take some action. Let's not have me talk at you for an hour. Because what we want to do is respect the intersectional experiences and honor each person without needing to know the details. And that's the hard part, right? Because a lot of the times we talk about disclosure rates. And there's been studies out there that say, at least in the US, only 5% of people disclose. We have this, we have that. We have people, whether or not they have the psychological safety at where they work or in their personal lives or whatnot. How do we make this operationalizing inclusion normal, right? And the way to do it is you don't need to know. You come to me with your social identities. I will accept you and love you for what you are and who you are, I should say. But I don't necessarily need to know those to accept you for who and what you are. And that is the approach we need to take as we look at the rest. So our first thing is you always ask everyone what their access needs are. Always. It's the first question. And this makes it so that nobody has to say, hi, I'm mysteriously neurodivergent, to say, hey, I really work best if you don't mind me getting interrupted a few times because it keeps my brain from getting, stalled out. Or I work best remotely. That's how I function the best. Other people have other reasons they may need to work remotely. Other people have reasons they may need to be around others. There's a million needs. Maybe somebody just needs flexibility because they're a caretaker, or I don't know, maybe they're moving. Everyone's going to have needs. I joke that in the winter, I need a hot cup of tea at all times. Everyone has needs. And I'm making light saying the tea, but the truth of the matter is, if you want people to belong, sometimes it's those little things that to you are silly and you don't know why. Truth be told, I have Raynaud's. My fingers lose blood flow when I get too cold. That's a lot of the reason I'm holding my cup of tea. There is a medical reason. I'm not being flippant. But you didn't need to know that I said I needed this. I needed my tea in the winter. We don't need to know. We do need to ask everyone what they need, though, so we can support them and create that culture of acceptance, support, and belonging. Because access needs are human needs. Somebody does not need to disclose to you in order for you to be able to meet their needs if you're asking everyone. So it doesn't matter if you're talking about at the organizational level. Maybe you're doing user testing and you're asking people, hey, what would you need to make this easier? And then in any feedback processes, hey, how could I have made this easier for you? What could I have done to make this more inclusive? Because people thrive when they have that sense of belonging. They thrive. According to Harvard Business Review, 56% in job performance, 50% drop in turnover risk, and 75% reduction in sick days, just from the sense of belonging. Another good way is to have multiple communications pathways. Not everybody communicates the same, and know what? They don't need to. So we want to have verbal and nonverbal options for communication. We want to have cameras optional. A lot of people, for a multitude of reasons, are just not comfortable being on camera all day. And then this is one I still struggle with, because I always feel like everyone's, on the journey with me. I always have to remind myself to give people context for meetings prior to a call. Give people time to emotionally, mentally prepare for the conversation you're going to have. And it doesn't have to be as verbose as when I try to overcompensate for forgetting. But it does need to be there. You need to be able to give people that, fair warning. And then a bonus tip, learn to recognize your own unconscious bias. Get out there. There are YouTubers. There are, pick a social media platform. I'm sure there's somebody talking about it. There are beautiful books out there. Always hit me up. My Goodreads is an interesting mix of, fiction and nonfiction. But I try to always read by a large group of people, of their social identities when they talk about their experiences, whether it be in nonfiction or fiction forms. And over the years, I am learning. Because there's millions of us in this world, and that means there's a million different components that make up our stories. And we're never going to get it all, but we can keep listening, because we have the power to change the way the world sees itself and works together. We have that power to work together and see ourselves as something more, something supportive. And it's just fantastic. So, all right, let me open this up for Q&A. I'm actually not sure where we are in time. I hid my phone so I wouldn't be seeing flashing notifications. So hopefully we're doing well on time and we have plenty of time for Q&A.
Oh, absolutely. We have oodles of time. No, I just wanted to say that was a great talk. Very moving, a very emotional subject as well. And yeah, it was great to hear you talk about it. Mark, have we got any questions?
So far, there's nothing in the chat and nothing in Slack. But I would have a question. As you said, you have reading tips like books. Where can we find these? Because I'm interested in reading more about it. You have a website where you can find them, a collection?
Honestly, I would have somebody hit me up either in the Slack channels or on LinkedIn or whatnot, and I can talk about what kind of books you're really interested in. I'm trying to think. There's always everything from, I've read Habben's book. I've read Alice Wong is a fantastic author. I am, of course, The Power of Different is an interesting read. About Us. It's a collection of New York Times essays written from the first person point of view from various people with disabilities. And that's a fantastic collection. And then I would just go on, on LinkedIn, I follow a lot of really amazing creators. If you, as I said, reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to connect you. Of course, I mentioned that and I didn't have that list prepared in my head.
Yeah. So I've seen then on the ID24 website, we have your LinkedIn link actually below your speaker's bio. So if you want to get a list or get some tips, maybe hit Donna up on LinkedIn. And I guess she's happy to help you there to find some good reading stuff to learn and actually to understand, because I myself find myself making many mistakes and learn every time I run an event from someone who is disabled, for example, because I am not. So and therefore I'm eager to learn, right? I remember that last year I had one speaker that had no arms and no legs. And we used the day before to get him into the venue to really check that there were no problems with him to get on stage with a wheelchair. He wanted to present without the wheelchair. And it was a fantastic talk about him dreaming to be a race car driver and how he achieved this. That was wonderful and moving and touching. And the good thing is, in this, as you mentioned in your talk, or as someone else mentioned in the video that you were playing, not to talk about the others, right? So that is something that we really have to take care of and make sure that we speak of people with disabilities as if they are what they are, usual people in quotes, right? And we have to constantly remind us, to be honest. And I think a good option to do this is reading, but also look to attend events actually that like this one, but also in person, and just constantly learn with in terms of hanging out with people who are blind, who are deaf, just to experience how it is to be amongst them, right? And make it natural for you to act, and don't be as if there's some kind of problem or something. I don't know if you know Molly Watt, for example. She's from UK. Deaf-blind person. She has the Usher syndrome. A good tip to go and search for her talks also, which are really powerful and moving, because she, if I remember right, learned when she was age 12 that she's going to be blind soon through the Usher syndrome. And being a girl at 12, I know it from my two daughters, is not easy already. And then to learn that you're going to be blind soon is, I cannot even imagine this. And so if you out there, check out for Molly Watt and talks that she gave, very, very powerful talks. And very.
I'd like to point out one thing you said is that disability is normal.
Yeah.
Everyone, if we are fortunate to live long enough, if you don't have one, we will all age into them.
Oh, yes.
100% of people's between the age of 45 and 55, their lenses in their eyes harden. So therefore, I have progressive bifocally thing on, but that's why reading glasses are so popular. You'll see them at every, here in America, you'll see them in every drugstore at least, because 100% of people, their lenses will harden, which means a lot of us have problems with that close-up vision. That is a natural part of aging. Yeah. I talked to my eye doctor about this. She's very excited that I talk about this because it's so normal. And anything that we other as a society is typically normal. And that's one of those oddities we have to keep in mind, that even though society seems to other people, there is no othering. Yeah. These are human experiences. Exactly. And those intersections are important. And frankly, the reason I wanted to do this talk was because a lot of the time when we talk about disability, we see frankly, there was a study recently asked artificial intelligence to show an autistic person, and they were all white men in their early 20s, every AI generated version. There are understandings throughout, whether it be the neurodivergent groups or disability or whatnot, that, people, a lot of the times if they want to just show disability representation, it's always someone in a wheelchair, which is a very important experience, but it's not the only one. People need to see these beautiful intersectional voices, because if we don't take a moment to just talk about it, we're not going to be able to be like, oh, wait, I'm doing it. And again, that's that recognizing your own unconscious bias that we all have, and that's okay that you have them if you're willing to change as you learn more. So that's why I really wanted to do this talk, is because I wanted to just say that, okay, I've been saying for years disability is normal.
Yeah.
But it's not only disability, and it's not only this one experience. There's a million of them out there.
Yeah,
very true. Oh, actually, we have a question now in the chat.
Good.
Oh,
Let's use the time to answer it. So it's on YouTube, and I hope I pronounced the name right. Rahmaud, he or she is asking, do you think Empathy Lab is obsolete? I find a discourse about it. Northern Americans or American audience find it like that, while some other country, even from disabilities communities, feel fine about it.
I'm just going to speak as Donna here. I feel it's something that can be a useful tool with other things. So for example, a dyslexia simulator is not really going to show somebody what it's like to be dyslexic any more than having somebody clumsily work through their voiceover on their Mac isn't not going to give somebody a real feel of what it's like to live with maybe low vision or something of those lines. It will show them specific barriers though. So for me, I think if it's in combination with something else. So for example, if I am telling you that technically this screen reader experience is functional and is conformant and all this other stuff, however, it's not really very pleasant, that's not really going, especially me saying it as a sighted user myself, that's not really going to necessarily hit home as much as me saying, look, here's a screen recording and you see this, and yeah, I can navigate it, but would you want to? And showing that, or showing that, yes, all caps looked really nice stylistically, but with the dyslexia simulator, can you tell what that word says? It helps put a period on a sentence, but I personally don't think it should be the whole conversation. If you want to build empathy, one of the things I always tease people is that, for example, our online experiences, and I'm going to grab my phone to be able to show this. What I tell people is, take your phone to a neighborhood, a family barbecue or something. Surround yourself with screaming children, loud music, balance your soda and your burger and your phone while, on this kind of maybe wet grass, so you're not exactly feeling very steady on your feet, you're squishing around, and then navigate and see if you can purchase something on your website. The sun is glaring, your hands are, these are something that you can recreate and that you can relate to. And you're not going to be able to see your screen as acutely because there's a glare, and because you're having some mobility barriers because your hands are full and you can't think straight with all the kids and the music that you don't really like. And you're maybe not feeling very steady on your feet because the grass is squishing and getting, wet between your toes, and it's really gross feeling, and you're distracted. All of these things are just your own human experience. If this is if I've described something that you are physically, would be physically doing yourself. this would be a very an experience you'd experience, but you're experiencing a lot of the same barriers. Assistive technology is not always about the screen reader. Maybe it's just the pinch and zoom because you have an awful glare and some little kid's wet, greasy fingers just got all over your screen. Maybe that's what your barrier is, but you're still benefiting from the same pieces. That's how the taking care of our most vulnerable impacts everybody on the web. Because if you're taking care of somebody who is maybe needing to be able to zoom their text, who is needing to be able to navigate it with limited mobility or dexterity, if you're taking care of those experiences, then the next time you're at that family or neighborhood barbecue and you can't think straight, maybe, and for the record, I say think straight because I never think in straight lines. Yeah. So I say that with love. But all those pieces come together to create something really powerful for everybody. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. I think the two main aspects that I was so pleased to hear about is obviously the intersectionality aspect, particularly when it comes to, purely from my experience, working with developers, either in within companies or just giving advice on the internets. There is often that the idea that yes, all screen reader users or all users with color blindness or reduced color perception, they all like the same thing. They're all basically this homogeneous mass, and yeah. The questions like, what do screen reader users prefer? It's like, from a point of view of a structure or something, or, an experience. And to me, that always makes me think, well, what would be the opposite question? Would a screen reader user who's designing web content, would they just go to one person who happens to be sighted and say, what's your favorite color? And they'll say blue, and then take the assumption from that right from now on, every website that I create needs to be blue because clearly, sighted users love the color blue. And yeah, there's just that kind of step where they don't understand that, we are still talking to individuals who bring their own experience, their own likes and dislikes, preferences, intersections of what their identity is, how they identify with. They might have other aspects that kind of color or influence their their decisions, and they're not just all screen reader users. Sorry, I'm going off at tangents, but but that is kind of sometimes very frustrating with that. And also the other aspect that I've been known to basically say to developers, look, you have, say, VoiceOver or something on your machine, just try it for yourself. But I know as well that can be a double-edged sword, similar to what you said about the empathy labs, that if you just leave them to that, they will draw their wrong conclusions potentially from that. So they do need to be guided in that experience. They will never get the true lived experience from just basically cosplaying. I'm now blind, or I'm now, I'm mobility impaired, for instance. It can kind of prepare them to the experience, like you say. They'll at least get the idea that yes, the mode of operation, for instance, is different. But yeah, they definitely need then the follow-up and the guidance of the actual people with the lived experience to tell them, yes, this isn't a problem, or this is more of a problem than you realize, for instance. And I always go back to my experience in a very past life, working in a university and working together with various kind of distributed web authors we had across the university, and a few people that they were doing it for the right reasons. They were doing it out of a feeling of empathy. But I remember one saying, "Oh, I've learned how to use JAWS on my Windows machine, and I went through our website, and isn't it terrible that our pages are so long and it takes so long to read? So should we redesign our entire website to just be short pages with like previous next buttons?" And I said, you've basically, kudos for trying out JAWS, but have you ever actually seen or experienced a screen reader user using JAWS? It's not it's not like TV. It's not a passive experience. They get to the page, sit back and listen to the entire page. I showed them some videos like on YouTube of, very proficient screen reader users with their however many million words a minute they got running, but basically it just sounded like a burst of almost static, and they just heard the entire paragraph read out to them in just a fraction of a second or something, and then they got it. But without that explanation of your experience of just playing with a screen reader, it's good, but it doesn't give you the actual experience. Sorry, I'm probably making the same point about 4 times.
No,
and
true.
I appreciate that, though. I mean, if you have, it comes back to that nothing about us without us. You need to have people with disabilities on your team.
Yeah.
And no one person is going to represent every screen reader user. Maybe somebody prefers JAWS and navigates by headings, where somebody has keyboard shortcuts and voiceover preset, so it's going to do X, Y, and Z that we don't know. But if you have people actively participating and actively on your team, people with disabilities aren't only your disability experts, but if they're on your team, they're going to give you voices and perspectives along the way. There was a book, Race After Technology, that was discussing racial bias at the systemic level in technology. And in that book, they were mentioning that the difference they had when they brought in different racial and ethnic backgrounds into the room, because there were things that they'd have, whether it be voice recognition or cameras or whatnot, that weren't accounting for people who didn't look like the 5 people in the room. And when you bring in disabled voices, the same things happen. You're going to get perspective, and those perspectives won't necessarily all be about, well, this is disability and this is my role, because this is a whole human, and they might have thoughts as a programmer, thoughts as a designer, thoughts as a QA person. I don't know. They're whole humans. The disability community is not there just to test our disability, is our stuff disability friendly. They're in every role in our organizations. So having them in the room, though, will, allow us to shift it left, to have it be a part of the first conceptual conversations.
Yeah, and it gives you the opportunity to ask questions and to be curious. And I advise you to do so, because that's how we learn, right? Ask questions like kids do. If you don't know, then ask for it. Ask and learn.
Respectfully.
Yes.
Respectfully.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I always need to put that caveat in there.
And also understanding that not every person from a particular group, or that you identified as a particular group, it's not their job to teach you either.
No.
So it's that kind of thing. Don't go up to, oh, you're a screen reader user, or oh, you're a wheelchair user. Let me ask you all the things that I've always wondered about it. It's like, no,
Yeah. And the same with the intersectional piece. You identify as you're female identifying, Black and disabled. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah.
Don't do that, people. Don't. This is not their job. That's not appropriate.
No, absolutely.
Or
be invited to a conference and say, right, or the reason why we were inviting you is to talk about your experience of that particular thing. It's like, is that all you see me as? It's frustrating, but we'll get there.
There's a lot of work to do.
That's it. I'm afraid we have to wrap it up. So once again, thank you very much, Donna. I mean, it was a great presentation and a great chat now at the end as well. I mean, I think we won't solve the problems, but I think we had a good crack at least looking at some approaches and potential pitfalls and everything else. So once again, thank you for being part of ID24.
Also, from my end, Donna, thank you so much for the presentation. fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
a
So
great
for the
one.
audience at home, if you like the session, like and subscribe, and you can subscribe to the ID24 channel itself. You'll be kept in the loop for all future events. Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you with thanks to our supporters, Google, Intopia, Barrier Break, Tetralogical, Intuit, Infoaxia, the law office of Lainey Feingold, and Inclusive Design will be back on the hour in about 9 minutes or so with our next session. So see you then. And once again, thank you, everybody.